Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Financial Advisor Marketing Show. I'm Katie Braden, founder of Innovating Advice, and I am joined by two fabulous women here with me today, Angela York and Elyse Stoner. Hey guys.
Hi. Thanks for
Hi,
having us.
this is great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for being here. We actually met, speaking of financial advisor marketing, we met at the Jolt conference here in Las Vegas a few months ago. We totally hit it off. We've had so many great conversations since, and we've realized a lot of synergy in what we all do. And I want each of you to share sort of a brief background of how you got into doing financial advisor marketing. But one of the conversations that kept coming up as we were talking about areas that advisors struggle the most with was around identifying and really attracting their ideal clients rather than spreading that broad net to everyone, really focusing. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. But first, I want to give each of you a chance to say hi, give a quick intro on who you are and how you got here. Elyse?
Thanks. So I'm Elyse Stoner. I am the founder and chief strategist of Fresh Perspective Consulting and also the co-founder of Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors. Sort of two spaces. What I did in my career, but the beginning part of my career is I come from the sports and entertainment world. I've flown in a helicopter with Bart Simpson. I've produced basketball games on TV. But really, as that all fast forward, I took everything that I learned in those spaces and I'm helping advisors be more strategic in their events and in their overall marketing strategy. Now, Angela and I actually sit on two different coasts. I'm based outside Philadelphia, and Angela is outside of LA in Orange County. But we met during the pandemic when another colleague that we both knew separately said, "You guys need to be friends." And we started masterminding together and really came up with this whole idea. And Angela will talk a little bit more about it, that we felt that there was a space in the financial advisor marketing world to really be able to help advisors be strategic in their marketing. And when we say strategic, really understanding who their ideal client is and how to talk with them and motivate them to do the things that you need to do. So Jolt was a great opportunity for us to meet some other folks in the space and meet some advisors and really understand how we can be of service.
And I do want to make sure you mention you have a pretty unique designation.
Yes, I do. So that little DES at the end of my name, we also like to talk about, what I did during my pandemic vacation. I am a digital event strategist. I got certified. So I really have deep understanding on the strategy that goes into digital events and digital event marketing and creating hybrid events. Not so much about the tables and chairs if we were in person, but really about the strategy that goes into an event and deciding what measurables we're going to use to determine if they're successful.
Yeah, that's great. Angela?
Thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Angela York. I am the founder of On Point Wealth Advisor Marketing and the co-founder of Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors with Elyse. I have been in the advisor marketing space for almost 23 years. I spent the first half of my career in-house in an advisory firm handling all the marketing and really everything else in the firm that I didn't need to be licensed for. So I was working with clients, I was working with centers of influence, I was working with the advisors themselves. In 2009, I branched off on my own to consult in this space. And I worked with local advisors and wholesaling firms to work on their marketing, their implementation, their marketing plans, their events, a lot of events. Fast forward to 2020, at the start of the pandemic, when events came to a screeching halt, I took the marketing that I was doing, the implementation, and I took it nationwide working with advisors. And at this point, Elyse and I met. And I was starting to get lots of questions surrounding virtual events and really evaluating how we go forward with a marketing plan. And it was just everything aligned with bringing strategy into developing marketing plans and answering some of these tough questions that were a result of everybody stopping and then restarting during the pandemic and looking at things in a different way. Because for my career working with advisors, everyone was working with a coach or had a different model that they were implementing. And it became very rote, taking a piece of paper, writing the months down and figuring out what we wanted to put in where. There wasn't any strategy behind it. And what was consistent is it wasn't necessarily working. And we had a big reset, brought in the strategy, and developed custom strategic marketing plans for advisors, where we have a 3-part process to really analyze the ideal client, which we'll talk about today, how we take that analysis, put it into the marketing recommendations, and then create the marketing plan that's really fine-tuned to your ideal client, which might not be who you think it is. So we take all of that, and you have a marketing plan that we then can analyze and determine what's working, what's not.
I love that. And like you mentioned, one of the first things really is identifying who is that ideal client. And both of you know, I mean, now that we are really going to be staying in this virtual world for a whole lot of people, and the importance of social media and having your website built out and SEO and video and all those other things, it's got to be attracting only who your ideal client is. If you're attracting all kinds of people, that's not going to be time well spent. And you're going to be frustrated sitting through discovery calls, just kind of going, this isn't my ideal client. So that's really what we're diving into today. And the first thing we want to talk about is really, why is it crucial for your business growth to identify your ideal clients? Because we all know, we do talk to some advisors that actually resist this idea of an ideal client. And I honestly just had a conversation with a firm not very long ago, and I said, who's your ideal client? And they genuinely had never heard that term. So as much as like we all talk about it, there still are a lot of people that aren't familiar with, what is that? Why does it even matter?
Right. Well, I think that's shocking to me, first of all, but being a marketer, it's like kind of where our bread is buttered, right? This whole idea of understanding who your ideal client is, to me, in the simplest form, like, who are you talking to, right? How many times do people say, oh, my ideal client is someone with money?
Yeah.
Okay. But really, it's a nice place to start. But really honing in on who that person is. Like, one of the things that we do is we create an avatar. Not, they're not blue and they're not coming from a Disney movie, but just this idea of who are they, because you need to know who you're talking to, right? If I'm standing here, and Katie, I'm sure you talk about this with your clients when you're doing video, right? Like, I could sit here and talk to the little dot on my camera, but if I don't have a picture in my head of who's on the other side of that little dot, it really doesn't make any sense. So I think that is really important. I think the other thing, our consumers and the world we live in, people are looking for personalization. The fact that I can put a post up and be like, hey guys, well, who are guys? And most people will probably pass over that because we're not talking to them. And it's about words, but it's also about imagery. It's about channels that we're using. This whole personalization thing isn't necessarily you must handwrite a note to each person individually, but just knowing where your ideal client lives, where they consume their media, what language they speak. There's so many reasons why that is going to be so important. And then as it comes to the marketing plan, right, like Angela alluded to, and you can put stuff down on paper, but if you're not really digging into and understanding what motivates your ideal client to act, why bother? So, I mean, I think those are just some of the reasons that it's really important.
And Angela, what would you say, to firms that have had substantial growth over the years, and maybe they refer largely on centers of influence and referrals, and really aren't in a position to identify sort of what their target audience is, even among like a huge variety of existing clients that they have? A lot of advisors will say, well, why do I need an ideal client? Like, I work with all these different kinds of people and it works well.
What I have been hearing is just what you alluded to, but also a common statement from advisors over the last few years. I want to work with nice people. I want to work with people who value working with my team. I don't need to work with everybody. They're usually midpoint in their career, have had success, have done some marketing, but know they want to get to another level, whether it's gearing themselves up to create a succession plan, whether it's bringing in more clients so that there are enough clients for junior advisors in the firm, whatever it might be. But the common comment that I see or hear is, I'm ready to not work with everybody that has money. I want to work with select people that fit my ideal client status. And they don't often say ideal client, but fit my mold, fit who I want to work with. And then we sit down, okay, well, that would be your ideal client. Let's look at that. Pick a half a dozen of your current clients that you'd like to clone, literally in that speak. Who would you like to clone? And they laugh. And then it's, okay, well, let's dig into what makes up these ideal clients. Not only demographically, not only personality, not only their attributes. And being a nice client, I hear that over and over, as silly as it sounds. There are clients, you want to mesh with everybody. You want them to mesh with your team. So it's not only looking at all those factors, but then the strategy piece that we bring, that Elyse has brought to this puzzle, is the psychographic part of it. It's what news are they reading? Where are they getting their news? What social media platforms are they on? What outside affiliations do they belong to? In addition to all the obvious questions, club memberships, who do they lean on for big decisions? And taking that data and information, however you gather it, and here's a takeaway. You put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and you just kind of put all the different answers together, and you look for the common denominators, or put it in a Google form. Have something that spits out that data, and you can see the common denominators. And then you can determine, who is my ideal client? And I know we alluded to it in the promotion for today. It's not always who you think it's going to be. So what I mean by that is, you may say, my ideal clients, the ones that I love working with today, they are, just by example, they are 60 years old, they live in X community, they belong to X country clubs, they're about to retire. Okay, great. That's not your ideal client though. And that's what our analysis gets to the root of. So when you're talking to your ideal client, they've been a client for 20 years. What was their situation 20 years ago? Were they going through divorce? Were they putting kids through college? Were they wanting to put kids through college? Did they inherit money? What was their reason to come to you and stay for 20 years? That's your ideal client. So looking at our 60-year-old ideal client who is about to retire and putting all the pieces together, who's been with you for 20 years, what were they doing when they were 40? We want that 40-year-old. That's the ideal client. And taking a step back and putting the whole picture together, the data, the age, the demographics, and the psychographics. That's how you find your ideal client.
Yeah, I like that, because it's always challenging, right? We have a lot of conversations about this in the profession, and some people are like, okay, do you want to work with, I'm a private pilot and we used to own an airplane. So let's say I was going to work with private pilots own airplanes, right? But that can still run the gamut of so many different kinds of people and different situations. And when I first started my financial planning firm in 2013, I was one of the very first people doing monthly retainer. And so I felt like I had to take on every client. And I really learned firsthand the value of having an ideal client, because the challenge was I was dealing with people with, all kinds of different situations. And it was like this huge pressure on me where I then had to be an expert in every possible area of everything across the financial planning spectrum. And I was like, and that was just way too stressful for me. There wasn't a consistent theme in who I was working with, how I could work with them. So, at kind of a high level, if we start there, what would you say in terms of should people focus more on, the hobbies, the life stage, the career people have? Where's that starting point? And let's say it's somebody starting with a fresh firm, right? Somebody just kind of did a breakaway and maybe hasn't had clients for the last 20 years.
One of the things that we recommend, which is so hard, is for advisors to stop and kind of think about themselves, right? As Angela's saying, we hear from so many people, I want to work with nice people. Well, nice is nice, but like, what does that mean? And what we have found is we've actually been able to help some of our advisors learn things about themselves by doing the ideal client analyses, because we find out from their clients what they like about their advisor. And so, for example, we have an advisor who is really focusing on women who are in a life transition, whether it's changing jobs or getting divorced. Well, what we found out was in her previous life, she was a critical care nurse. And so that caring, helping people really comes to the forefront, and we're able to kind of help her identify that. So in that same space, it becomes some reflection of what's important to you as a person, and finding these ways to communicate. The three of us often joke the favorite word that came out of that JOLT conference was authenticity. Authenticity really helps you in your ideal client space, because that's really what people are saying when they're saying, I want nice clients, like people that they get and people who get them. So there's a little bit of soul searching, and we can kind of help people because soul searching is really hard.
It is hard. And I would say even somebody that you might think is nice, Elyse, I might think isn't nice, right? So even if we think about
I doubt that. Everybody out there, you're all really nice. It's all good.
But you know what I mean?
Yes,
because people click with different kinds of people. So I do agree that's a great place to start. I think everybody should have a no jerks rule. And again,
right.
Some people are going to be a jerk to one advisor and not another because you just click differently. And that's okay.
And I think, talking about what you were asking about, Katie, about I started my business and I just took anybody who would buy insurance or invest with me. And now how do I kind of weed that out? I think that is part of it, which is it's part of the business life cycle, right? I mean, whether you're marketing consulting or you're doing event implementation like Angela was doing before, like, you're interested? It's like dating, right? Like, oh my God, you're interested? Yay. But then you kind of learn a little bit more, and you learn how to kind of get rid of the ones that you don't like and hone in on the ideal client. And let's face it, we're talking about growing our businesses. Part of that ideal client is someone who's going to help our business grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another big point is, especially let's say take the firm that's had clients for 20 years and, have got a big variety of clients, but then they're thinking, okay, who do I want to market to going forward? There's understandably a lot of trepidation for people to say, okay, but if I'm only marketing to this ideal client, am I not going to alienate all these other clients that I have had for a long time that don't fit that ideal client profile?
You might, however, and again, nobody wants to go in going like, yeah, I'm not interested in you anymore. But I think when you do it strategically and people don't see themselves on the pictures in your website, or in the pictures on your LinkedIn, or in the audience, you're doing a lot of video perhaps, and your people are really into video, they kind of weed themselves out. And ideally, I think what's going to happen is you're growing this way, but you're not firing people, but they're just, it's the circle of life.
You might have to fire. It's okay to fire a couple clients along the way as you're growing your business, but we don't want to look at That's not what this is about.
Right.
But it's honing in it. And Katie, there are a few things that you had asked earlier that I wanted to touch on. First is bringing it all to focus that you now, if you're midway through your career, you don't have to be everything to everybody like you were when you were starting out. And even if you're starting a new practice, maybe you're changing careers, you still don't have to be everything to everybody. And taking that ideal client, you asked where to start. The best place to start is looking at, if you have a business already, looking at your ideal client, the clients that you'd like to clone, and how did they come to you. That's the best place to start if you have been in practice. And if you haven't been in practice and you're just starting and you don't have those ideal clients to kind of look at and clone, imagine them in your head. Who would you like to work with? I want to work with the pilots, and really get into the detail of what that would look like, and then research maybe it's Facebook groups, maybe it's going out and doing ground level research. If you want to be in pharma, work with people that are in pharma and manage their money, you want to start networking in the pharma space and seeing what do those people look like, what organizations do they belong to, what are they doing. So that's how you can start. And then you had also asked, well, advisors are looking to grow their business through referrals from clients as well as centers of influence. We can also call them referral partners. Well, you still want to do that. Those are big pieces, but you want to have the core focus of who your ideal client is to then go to both channels and say, these are the type of clients we are working with and want to continue to work with. And that actually helps them identify. People ask us all the time who our ideal clients, and we have a very specific answer. And then people start popping into their heads. Oh, I want to introduce you to this person or this person. If you keep it too broad, people don't know how to refer.
Yeah, definitely. So that actually segues us perfectly into, okay, so once you've kind of identified this ideal client, there's that word again, strategically, how do you strategically market to your ideal client?
Elise's favorite word.
It is that and why. I always say I'm like a really, really big 3-year-old because people do things and I'm like, well, why are you doing that? I don't know, because I've always done it. And as I laugh, it's one of the reasons Fresh Perspective Consulting started, right? If your answer is that's the way I've always done it, then you need a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the question was, what do you do now? Right? I've identified my ideal client. I figure out where they live, what they do. So you create a marketing plan strategically, right? Like, what are those bigger, higher level opportunities? Because we all know, like, not only are we bombarded with marketing messages, but there are a bazillion marketing opportunities. So thinking about that ideal client, where they live, where they get their information, that's how you're going to go in and kind of narrow in on how you're talking to them, meet them where they are, literally and figuratively. I know before we hop off here, and we'll also put it in LinkedIn, we have an ebook. It's like a one sheet that talks about 6 essentials to creating a strategic marketing plan, and just sort of what are those 6 steps that you need to do. You need to understand who your ideal client is. You need to be able to think about where they get their information, what language. Always, here's another tip: any sort of marketing that you're doing, please make sure that there is a call to action. Because to just say, here's this thing, if you're not telling people what to do, they're not going to do anything. It's pretty simple.
And one call to action.
Right.
Not 7 calls to action. Not go to my website and connect on LinkedIn and send me an email and download the ebook and then attend my next webinar.
Right. Exactly. Again, that big 3-year-old, right? Like we have short attention spans.
Keep it simple.
Right. So I mean, that's really, you're going to create something strategic. And part of that strategy that I think people also miss is the back end. And what I mean by that is we go all this, we find our ideal client, we know where to talk to them, we figure out how we're going to market. You need to do the follow-up. You need to understand the measurables. And I was just actually talking with a client about this the other day. We live in a very sales-oriented, measurable world. What's your ROI? What's your cost of attaining a client? I don't prescribe to those because I think if you are consistently marketing in the strategic space, it's going to be hard to come up with an ROI, or it's going to be hard to come up with that cost per, capturing a client, because you can do everything right. But if your client's not ready to make a move, or your potential client isn't ready to make a move, there's not much you can do about that. But I think it's being strategic and having information of how you're going to measure your success is also that strategic piece.
When I say that was a big theme at Jolt, was I feel like every other presentation they said, look, it's going to take 18 to 24 months for any marketing plan that you do to really show results. And that can be frustrating, right? You've gone through all this effort, you've identified your ideal client, you're putting stuff out there, and you're not getting that instant gratification. It is, truly, it can be kind of a bit of an ego ding.
But if you're being authentic and let me finish that sentence for you. If you're being authentic and you're really being committed to speaking to those ideal clients, you have to stay the course.
Yep.
It is the number one area for ever, I think, at least in my experience, that advisors fall short, or firms in the financial services space, when they're doing all this marketing. I always ask, well, what's your follow-up? Are somebody going to call the clients that brought people, the new prospects that showed up? It always ends when the lights go off at the event or the camera goes off. They always fall short of, usually, there might be somebody listening. This is when I always do follow-up. You're an exception. And that's where we're trying to get the conversation to go now. I think I just replied in a post from yesterday or this morning that besides identifying the ideal clients, follow-ups, and this can be a whole conversation, whole other interview, to do the follow-up. Because why spend the money for the great cocktail party or the educational event and the speaker if you can't follow up to engage in that conversation, to answer more questions, to build the trust from the prospects and or your current clients, because then the trust leads to more assets under management, new assets under management, and it's a whole circle if it falls short. And the reason it falls short most often that I hear is you don't have enough staff, you don't have enough bandwidth. It's okay, you can outsource it, but you need to do that follow-up. And it could be it could be a digital follow-up, followed by an email, we always recommend calls, but we can't use the fact that you don't have enough bandwidth or you don't have enough staff to do it. Because if you can't do the follow-up, it's don't do the event.
Yeah, you should almost start with the end in mind, right? Start with the end, make sure you've got that covered, and then kind of come forward from there, because you're absolutely right. And could I guess that you guys help with some of that?
Absolutely. One of the things that I talk about, I mentioned ROI. And what I realized is, especially as we're talking about events, but just in general with these opportunities, I have this philosophy of ROM, which is the return on your moment. You are creating a moment of connection between you and that ideal client, between you and that referral partner. You need to do all the things to be able to measure the value of that ROM. And whether that is following up on the survey, or, you meet somebody at a networking event and you're like, oh my God, they were really cool, but you don't connect with them on LinkedIn, or you don't schedule a call. your ROM is going to be low, and you're pretty much losing that value of that moment because you're not doing the work to keep it up.
Yep. I like that.
100%.
Return on the moment. That's wonderful.
Yep.
So we are at time, but I want to make sure that we have a chance for you two to share anything else. I'll put your website up here. I also put it in the comments so people can easily just click through. You mentioned you've got a little download there. Anything else you two would like to share?
You can find us on LinkedIn. We're both there individually, and we also have custom strategic marketing for wealth advisors. So connect with us there. And we would love to hear about your ideal clients, and can also help you if you're kind of shy and don't want to ask people to tell you how wonderful you are.
Yeah, and I think we're all kind of working on our own strategic marketing. So I'll just say for people watching, the three of us have been talking about, maybe doing a workshop. To Elise's point, maybe sometimes people are nervous about, asking their clients or starting a new firm. And so what does it look like to do that? And then, of course, my part would be, okay, now how do you create videos and that content that is instantly grabbing that ideal client from the get-go? So if that's something that sounds interesting to people, let us know. We're in talks about kind of maybe rolling something out like that in the fall or later this year, because there's clearly a lot of conversations still to go here. So I'd also love to have both of you back on. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It was so fun.